Right, can Flayer beat Burst? Short answer, yes. Haha. Right, firstly, apologies. This is like 3 a.m. footage after the wife kicked me out of bed for snoring too much and going, Arkveld, 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 ah. So, yeah, footage isn't going to be that great, but I did a video yesterday on how basically you just need one build in the game at the moment, and it's this weakness exploit Flayer. A load of other people replied. I was actually quite impressed with the responses. Of course, there's always a few idiots to throw into the mix, but here we are. Anyway, one of the main things that I was actually kind of confused about, and I did it in the manner in which I did it, simply just because probably the most reputable source of information when it comes to bow guns is a guy called Femito? I can't remember how to pronounce it. He probably doesn't even remember me. I worked with him alongside Jin Jinx and Tuna with Monster Hunter World and Iceborne with some of the shot calculations. But yeah, this is his channel. If you want some absolutely great content when it comes to bows, light bow guns, heavy bow guns within the Monster Hunter franchise. He's done a bit of Remnant as well. He's a speedrunner. That's one thing you need to take into account, because one of the things that I did get, some guy left this, is actually quite an accurate comment. Now when I'm seeing videos of people getting faster kills without this setup, I mean, I don't think I stated a time, so I'm not sure where he's getting that part from. But still, there are people like Femito, SD Shepherd, Acantor X, Team Darkside, obviously, Vicry, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, that will find weird and wacky ways to get a very small damage window, and during that damage window they will brutalize the monster and get a 2-minute clear time. This is how Team Darkside at the moment are currently getting 2-minute clear times on things like Tempered Gormagala. Do not compare yourself to them. What they are doing is something that most of us can only friggin' dream about. Now, to explain what this video is about in a very simple term, if you've watched Team Darkside's video or Femito's videos utilizing Chain and Agitator and Weakness Exploit, etc., are these good builds? Yes. However, in order to get the clear times that they're getting, they're 2 minutes, you need to be able to aggro the monster to a certain point of when you then have Agitator and all the rest of your buffs active, and then you have about 30 seconds to 1 minute to kill the monster. If you can't do that, your build is not operating in an optimal manner. That's just how speedrunning works. Are these going to be the best in slots builds and sets for what they're doing? Yes, absolutely. That's how speedrunning works. However, if you can't do that, this is a better option. It will actually still increase your clear times, maybe not to a speedrunner level, and the overall damage performance does actually beat out both Agitator and Burst. And how it does this is actually very simple. It uses a very, very easy concept to understand. It's called uptime. Now, admittedly, this uptime isn't actually immediate. It takes a minute. You have to actually start being able to build up getting wounds on the enemy, and you don't actually want to destroy those wounds immediately. You want them there for as long as possible and then to just casually break them throughout your play. The reason for this, Weakness Exploit at level 5 gives 30% affinity to just weak points and another 20% to weak points plus a wound, which is 50% affinity. Plus Maximum Might, which is what I use in basically all of my heavy bowgun builds. This is a total of 80% affinity. And once you start building up those wounds, they're there for basically the vast majority of the fight. In contrast, if you're not running Flayer, you don't generally tend to get those wounds, and when you do, there's only really one of them. You don't really have your pick of the choice, and a lot of the time it will be at the back end of the monster that you don't really have access to, which means you're really only rocking 30% affinity from Weakness Exploit 5. Obviously, there are going to be chances or opportunities for you to get that full 50%, but for the vast majority of your bowgun play, you're only going to be operating on the 30% from the weak point. Plus Maximum Might. Obviously, you're running Burst, but let's just say we're going to be going with Critical Boost 1. I have an extra 20% affinity with a 28% increase on my critical hit damage. 0.2 times 1.28, 20% affinity, times our critical damage multiplier. That is a total of 25.6% more damage, essentially. What does burst give on a bowgun, for example? 10 raw, 18 raw on melee weapons. It does get a bit weird with element. It's like 140 or 120 depending on the weapon. I think greatsword gets like 200 as well. So when it comes to element, yes, burst is actually a lot more powerful, but this is neither here nor there. We're talking uptime here. Your raw stat does not compete with that extra 20% affinity from all the wound generation that Flayer would give. It just physically can't. It's impossible. So, I have just completed a Gravios utilising my Flayer build. I think you saw like a quick sneak of it, and I swapped over to what is currently one of the top heavy bowgun builds. It's recommended by Famito. No shame against him. I love the guy. He's absolutely brilliant when it comes to his workings, etc., etc. However, I am going to be showing how the initial damage phase, like getting into the fight, burst does win. Burst does beat Flayer in this point. The moment I start the fight when there's no wounds active, burst does win. But the moment I start to get wounds, this build, the one you're literally watching right now, vanishes into the ether. It doesn't perform. Now, admittedly, I have picked Gravius for a very particular reason, and that reason is being that his raw hit zone values are shocking. They're really bad. The guy is literally a damn walking boulder, for crying out loud. So one of the tests that I like to do is find monsters that are typically really, really scummy to fight with things of a certain weapon. Good example of this for heavy bowgun is something like Gravios. Doesn't actually have a lot of HP, but his defense is at 99. Also doesn't help that I'm doing this at like 3 in the morning. I'll upload it when I wake up in a few hours. Now, just to show in the initial stages of the fight, on screen now in the top right, this is the Flayer build. Like, the max damage I was really getting, I think at one point I got an 8, whereas the build utilising burst is getting like 9s. There's a 12 there. Like, initially the damage is a lot higher, and then once we start breaking and actually able to hit the belly, yes, burst is still winning. The caveat to all of this, quite simply, is the fact that across the board, the Flayer build is going to do a lower damage number, but it's going to have a higher rate of critting. And because of that higher rate of critting, it's going to have a higher damage output overall. Just to show as well, you can see burst being active, and every time I hit, it flashes, bloody blah, and when I reload, it counts down. So burst is active here. The next argument, and well, I say argument, it's actually a good point. Agitator. Is Agitator still going to be one of the best skills in the game? Yes, absolutely. I don't think it's going to be as effective as it was in World/Iceborne, and that's simply just because in World Iceborne, we were able to actively sit there and go, I want Agitator active. I'm going to slam this monster into a wall or punch it in the face 4 times, and ta-da, it's angry. We don't really have that in Wilds. The overall consistency and uptime of Agitator is now significantly decreased. I wouldn't say it's decreased to a point of where it's worthless. It's very clearly still a very good skill, but unless you're able to make a huge capitalization on Agitator being active, I don't really see many people outside of the top end speedrunners actively getting a lot of use out of it. In fact, it's easier to cancel Agitator than it is to activate it. After you've broken like 3 wounds, they stop being angry. And if you've got a bow player in your group, or if you are a bow player and you pop 3 wounds, you can turn Agitator off very, very damn easy. Now, if you can get a consistent uptime with Agitator, that extra 15% affinity and plus 20 raw, of course, that would be Flayer, but it's then going to be a question of uptime. Quite simply, how often is the monster angry versus how often are you actually hitting wounds. Although the wounds with the 20% affinity is more in affinity, but that plus 20 raw is going to make Agitator the more powerful. But this is also assuming that you're at least weakness exploit 3, potentially 5 if you can also get the wounds as well, and Agitator 5. There's not really many builds that could do that, as well as them mixing in burst. And this, if you could do it, is then going to be a very, very, very highly optimized set that is going to be more akin to speedrunners, and mostly using some of the lower defensive gear so that if you do get hit, especially from a tempered monster, you're probably going to be dead or running around in a circle, panicking to take a damn ancient potion or a max potion, which is now going to be consuming time. So, can Flayer beat things like Burst? Potentially even Agitator, even if you had like HCZS, I believe his name is, the guy that did the 2-minute Tempered Gormagala run. Yeah, he had like a 70% uptime on Agitator. So, there's that. But if you're not capable of that, because again, that was like a 2-minute 43 fight, and he had like 1-minute 53 uptime on Agitator. That in itself needs to be considered a frigging feat, not just the 2-minute 43 time. So yeah, Flayer can win, but it's all down to uptime. The overall consistency of getting those wounds and then utilizing those wounds to bolster your affinity, your crit, is going to be a much more beneficial way than relying on something like Burst or indeed Agitator, simply just because once you have those wounds active, you can constantly use them, whether the monster is angry or not. Those crits will outperform what Burst is capable of, and depending on how skillful of a player you are, this is like going to be the biggest caveat. If you are someone like Famito, that is like a top tier player that's able to burn down monsters in like 3 minutes flat and under, then this probably won't be of benefit to you. But if you're taking like 5 minutes a hunt, then this will be better because you're going to have a higher uptime on those wounds than what Agitator will actually be able to give to you. You'll get what? Agitator activate twice, maybe? Anyway, have fun. Good luck. Don't die. Bad for the health.